bet you didn't know, Cuba does not have to be an expensive destination. I'm Melanie Tucker, owner of Rare Finds Travel, and thanks for joining us on our 5-part Conversations to Cuba series. I created this in an attempt to give you a vision of what your trip to Cuba could be like, and I hope it helped. Video 1 was all about legality. Yes, it's still legal to travel there. Video 2 was about food. You'll be amazed at the food that's waiting for you down in Cuba. Nothing like what you read in the papers. Video 3 was all about communism versus capitalism. Yes, I introduced you to my favorite entrepreneurs in the city, and you'll be the best way for you to travel in support of the Cuban people by hiring these entrepreneurs. Video 4 was about safety. Yes, not only is it a safe destination, but I myself have road tripped all the way out to Santiago, and I tell you a little story from it. All of these videos you can find on the Rare Finds Travel YouTube channel, so go there and check it out. If you have any questions, email me at melanie@rarefindstravel.com. So this brings us to Video 5. Video 5 is about budgeting. Cuba does not have to be an expensive destination. The reason that many people think that it is because a lot of the large tour companies have packaged these week-long trips with all of this bundling and padding, and the price comes up to $5,000–$6,000. And so people think that's a pretty expensive destination, and it doesn't have to be like that at all. Now, some things in Cuba are pricey, so let's get a handle on what's expensive and what's not. Gasoline is expensive in Cuba. So therefore, anytime you're hiring transportation, keep that in mind. If you're going to hire a driver to go out to Pinar del Rios to the tobacco plantations for the day or to the caving out there, then you know that price is going to be a little bit higher. Gasoline is expensive. But the main building blocks of a trip, like the flights and the lodging, they don't have to be. I just bought a round-trip non-stop ticket from Newark down to Havana for $330. No kidding, on United. And lodging can run anywhere from $80 to $350 a night, but most of it's on the lower end. Now that's typical for any trip that you might take to Europe. That would be typical cost lodging, right? That's not overly expensive. And then there's food. Now, some of the fancier restaurants, it's true, are going to charge a little bit steeper prices, and fish, ironically for an island, is kind of a delicacy. So those prices are going to be a little bit higher. But you can get a local lunch for as little as $10. And there are some local spots where only the locals go, and you can get Emilio to take you there, where you can get a pork barbecue sandwich and a drink for what is the equivalent of like $2. So travel to Cuba is not expensive. So one of the reasons that little pork barbecue place is so inexpensive is that it runs in pesos. So let's review the two currencies again. Cuba has two currencies. One is the Cuban peso that the locals use, and one is the convertible peso, the CUC, and that's what the travelers use. So the CUC is way more valuable, and this is kind of what's created the whole economy problem, one of the issues down there in Havana, because a local person will go and get a government job, get paid by the government, get paid in pesos, and then they can only have pesos to use, and it doesn't give them much buying power. This is the reason Emilio, even though he was trained as an engineer, works in tourism, so that his wife, who's trained as a doctor, how she can keep working as in the medical practice, which is very rewarding to her and also very much needed by the Cuban people down there. So that is the compromise that their family has made. One of the partners stays working a government job, and one of the partners works in tourism. But how will you handle your money when you go to Cuba? Now, first thing to know is that credit cards are not accepted in Cuba from the United States. You might see Europeans using their credit card, and you might be curious about that, but any credit card off of a U.S. bank is not accepted. That means that you're working on an all-cash basis when you are in Cuba, which means that when you take off from the airport here in the United States, you have to have all of the money that you need for your trip until you come back to the United States. This includes your lodging, your transportation, your activities, your food, your mojitos, your tipping, your everything. Shopping, rum, cigars, everything. So that's kind of a lot to wrap our head around, right? That's very unusual for us. So some people end up taking quite a bit of cash down there to the airport. Now, when you get to the airport, you can exchange your US dollars for CUBs right at the airport. Some people wonder if it's beneficial to wait till you get into town, but the answer is that it's all controlled by the government, so you're going to get the exact same rate whether you convert at the airport or whether you convert at a bank in town or whether you convert at a hotel. So it's absolutely all the same. Now, one thing that you can know that might be important if you're taking a large amount of cash is that the Cuban banks penalize US dollars because it all dates back to the embargo and all of those problems. And so they charge it's discounted 13%, which means that if you give $100, you're going to walk away with about 87 kooks, okay? Now, if you take euros, you get 1-to-1. There's no penalty. So my answer to that is, should you convert to euros, should you not? My answer to that is that it really depends. If you're only using, if you can have some things prepaid, say you're using an Airbnb and these are prepaid through Airbnb, then, or say people who come on my trips and their trip is completely paid for in advance and they're just paying for some mojitos and they're tipping and some shopping, then maybe they're not going to take so much money. And in that case, it's not worth their time to go to the American Express office or to their bank and to order euros. It's just not time, it doesn't make sense, right? But if you're going to be taking $1,000 or $2,000 down there, then that does start to add up. Think of 13% times that. And in that case, you might want to go to your local American Express travel office or your bank and convert your dollars to euros, and then converting the euros to kooks, you won't have any penalty. Of course, you want to make sure that you're not over converting, because then if you don't use all of that money, then you're going to lose in that conversion. You know, they get you coming, you're going. You know how that works, right? But still, this is good information to know. The bottom line is, you're working on an all-cash basis, you take cash with you, doesn't matter if you convert to kooks at the airport or in town, and if you're taking a large amount of money, consider taking euros instead of dollars. So overall, Cuba does not have to be a really expensive destination. And as a matter of fact, we spend most of our resources in Cuba in helping our guides and drivers through gratuities, because that seems to be the best way that we can travel in support of the Cuban people. We also do a lot of donations, and this is completely optional, but I get a lot of questions about it, so I'm going to spend a minute covering a couple ideas here. So people wonder what to take. You know, it doesn't really help to take sugars and candies and even pencils. Like, they have those kinds of items that you might think, like if you're traveling to Mexico or something. But the kinds of things they need are this. They need medical supplies, and I don't mean technical things, I mean like Band-Aids and condoms and Tylenol, those kind of things. They need personal care items like sunblock. They need household items like Gorilla Glue and duct tape, things like that. They need tech items. That's a big item. It's very hard to get tech down there. So use smartphones, use tablets, use laptops. Many people traveling from the United States work for companies that have laptop trade-in programs, and they have laptops that are free to take. So you can get them all cleaned out, get them ready to go, and take them down there. Take your old smartphone that your kid dropped and they broke the screen, put a new screen on it, take it down there. And a big one, flash drives, because they don't have a lot of bandwidth down there. They work all on the black market, because if they get regular internet, then the government censors what they're doing. So they do everything on the black market, and they can't afford a lot of bandwidth. So what they do is once a week or once a month, they get a package of TV and movies. And they have to store it all on flash drives, and then they use it, and they come back, and then they erase it, and they put the new ones on for the next month. So they really need flash drives, and big size flash drives. That is one of the most valuable things that you can take for them. Now, other items, toys are good, Play-Doh, things like this, that's always great. Clothing, either used or new, that's always great. Also, just some fun items, like we take Yankee baseball caps and things like that. They love that kind of thing. And then the last thing I would say is to think about your passions or your hobbies here at home. And people down in Cuba have the same loves that we have. So one of my clients, he was a big cyclist. So what he did is he took special supplies for Jorge, who was our bike tour guide, and he took bike tubes, and he took bike glue, and he took headlamps and helmets, and that was really helpful. And then another woman, this is one of my favorite stories, she's an artist down in Florida. She was on my February trip, and what she did is she got a whole handful of, a whole bushel of a really good quality, large professional paintbrushes. And she would walk around these galleries in Old Town, and she would hand out paintbrushes. And that was one, I witnessed one of these, and she walked in and presented this paintbrush to this gallery this artist there in the gallery, and the person's eyes just welled up, and they had her pause, and they ran and they got an old painting, and they rolled it up and gave it to her as like a memento to take home. And it was such a touching scene, and it helped her to support a similar craft in Cuba, and that was just a great thing, a great memory that I have from that trip. So if you want more ideas for donations to take to Cuba, you can go onto my YouTube channel, Rare Finds Travel, and check out how to make a big difference on your trip to Cuba. And then that ties it up. So thanks for joining us for Conversations to Cuba. Have any questions, email me at Melanie at Rare Finds Travel, and have a great time on your trip to Cuba.